welcome to Cappy Cottage Store Porch. Today we are dealing with the subject of uncivilized and touching the jaguar. I have to ask you, because a lot of people listening to this are interested, what role did your experience with plant medicine in the Amazon allow you to confront these fears and go through them? And do you think they played a role at all? Would you have gotten there without them?
Well, so when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in 1969, I was in the Amazon, deep in the Amazon, with the Shuar people who were hunters and gatherers, living very what we would call primitive lives, and I got very ill. I couldn't keep any food down. I was dying, and it was a 3-day terrible trek to the nearest medical facility. I couldn't even stand up without help. And one night a shaman said he would heal me. And it was a really scary sort of thing because this guy, he was covered with facial tattoos and his body was naked except for a loincloth. He was terrifying. It didn't look like any doctor I'd ever seen before, but he's all I could manage. And so that night he gave me ayahuasca. Now it's 1969. I'd never heard of it. I had no idea. And next thing I know, I'm drinking this little cup of this very foul tasting stuff, and then I go into these wild visions. And in that process, at one point, I've got my eyes closed. I'm seeing this amorphous form in front of me, and the shaman yells to me, "Touch the jaguar." And I'm terrified. I open my eyes. I'm in the middle of the jungle in the middle of the night. Where's the jaguar? Oh, there's the jaguar. Where's the jaguar? And he says, no. Close your eyes and see the jaguar and then touch it. And so I closed my eyes. This amorphous form shapeshifted into a jaguar. And I heard this voice like my mother saying, "The food and drink will kill you." And I realized that I grew up in rural New Hampshire where we ate very bland foods and we were very hygienic. And suddenly I'm living with people who eat very strange foods, live squirming white grubs that you pull out of a rotting log and down the hatch, and they don't drink water in the Amazon because they know the rivers have organic matter, fallen trees, dead animals. So the women make a kind of beer by chewing the manioc root and spitting it. And it sets up a fermentation process and becomes an alcohol that you can mix water with. And I'm drinking a lot of spit beer because you got to rehydrate a lot, and eating a lot of squirming white grubs. But I saw in this vision quest that the ayahuasca helped me see that every time I ate this stuff, I heard a voice saying it'll kill you. At the same time, I saw how incredibly healthy and robust the Shuar are. They're hunters and gatherers. Their men are very, very strong. They live to be very old if they're not killed in a hunting accident or something. And so I realized that night that it wasn't the food and drink that was killing me. It was my mindset, my perception. And after that, the shaman told me I needed to become his apprentice. And one of the first things he taught me was, touching the jaguar. He said, touching the jaguar means when we have a blockage in front of us or something we fear, if we run from it, it follows us. The jaguar is what we fear, and if we run from it, it'll chase us. But if we reach out and touch it, it'll give us the power and the inspiration to change our perceptions. And as we change our perceptions, we change our actions, and then we change our reality. But that's the basis of shamanism. It's also the basis of psychotherapy, modern psychotherapy, and quantum physics, and marketing and advertising and politics and everything.
Yeah, interesting. I'd like to ask Michael the same question. Like, how has plant medicine affected your ability to deal with fear in any way, shape, or form?
So I had my first experiences when I was a teenager. And I think what the interesting thing was, it basically deconstructed everything that I thought about the world at the time. I felt like if I'd been going along as my life on like a computer chip, all of a sudden you hit a tripwire and you're seeing out this way. And that honestly kind of put me on a whole quest to figure out I guess what does it all mean, and how do you make some kind of meaning out of something that seems completely meaningless? And from there, I think that that kind of got me interested in diving into different religious philosophies, and having experiences in nature and just diving deeper. And I think the biggest thing, which also kind of applies to where we are now with the possibility of human extinction, was, to me, fear. Death was my biggest fear. And I think through these experiences, kind of getting to a point where you can fully embrace death, and in fact, once you, instead of sort of shying away from it, once you recognize it exactly for what it is, to me, it's like it opens up your whole life a lot wider, and you don't feel like you have to go along any prescribed rules given to you by anyone else, because it's just, you have your one life and it's pretty much wide open. So I think in many ways, I would say that's how it has affected me with fear. I don't know if you want to continue down this route. Just something else that was interesting that I thought of when John, you were saying about your granddaughter and your grandson, your daughter, just thinking about the world that you'd be leaving for them. I think there's a lot of young people right now that have this sort of like existential dread about the impending sort of either end of the world or human extinction. And I think I went through it myself, especially before going to do Uncivilized. That was, I think, some part of what propelled me to do it. But realizing, I think at one point there's this horrible like existential dread that it may all be over. And then I think it almost comes this point where you're like, well, just almost accepting it's going to be over, but then in a sense almost banking on it. So at one point you were attached to life and survival, and now rather than a balance, I think sometimes some of us are now attached to the idea that it's all going to be over. We don't need to think about the future because there is no future, essentially. And I think it's an interesting question, especially when I hear people my age thinking about, talking about having kids. Whether there's going to be a world that is going to be decent enough to live in to have kids or not. And then I feel like, especially as we get older, those questions become a lot more real and a lot more pressing. So I'd just be curious, what you think about that in terms of our attachments to either like life and survival, or our attachments to extinction, and we get to wipe our hands, it's over.
Yeah. Incidentally, I want to say, when you've been talking, Michael, the waves have been speaking also. We've been hearing water, which I think is beautiful. Is it? Yeah, it's nature speaking through you too. It's there with you. I think that's actually very, very beautiful. um, so yes. So what was the question again?
Just sort of the different ways of relating both to life and death, and also then the idea of either our survival or our extinction, and how we might attach to those, and how we need to maybe think of these as we move forward.
So, I learned from my work with indigenous people, and after training with that shaman in the Amazon, I later did with the shamans in places like Iran and Egypt and all over different cultures. And, it's so interesting how these people truly believe in that everything is spirit, and that the ayahuasca can speak to us because its spirit is coming into us. And that tree behind you there, that has spirit. This cat, of course, has spirit, and the rocks have spirit. It's all spirit. And I spent a lot of time talking with spirits. Now I got to keep, I'm a trained economist, as chief economist. I'm a rational person on So I'm not. This is not a. This comes from a place of rationalism, of true, intellect as well as heart for me. That, and Einstein says, the matter and energy never end. They just transform. They just shapeshift, and it's all part of us. So for me, it's like uh, I'm I'm just here to learn in this particular body. And the next time around, I may be a tree. Most people, I think, that believe in future and past lives think that there have always been people, but that's not my belief, and it's not the indigenous belief for the most part. I may be a cat, or maybe that tree. We're here to learn, and human beings have a very important learning process because we are the pilots of the space station Earth. And it's in our hands at this time. That may not always be true because we've been guiding it toward disaster, but the disaster is only a disaster as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to destroy the space station, but we may destroy life as we know it. But nature's speaking to us so strongly. It's one of the reasons I think ayahuasca has become so popular, and peyote and mushrooms and all these other plants have become so popular, is because nature's speaking to us very strongly. Veganism, vegetarianism, herbal medicines, all these things are speaking to us. And now this virus has really come out of nature, just like HIV came out of nature. And so does the older SARS virus, because it's speaking to us. And for the first time, it's a global message. Every human being, in fact, everything on this planet is affected by this virus in one way or another. And even before the virus came, we knew that there were once in 100-year events happening every year or so. Hurricanes like the one you were in out there in the jungle, which you handled so magnificently, beautifully, with such grace and such courage and such brilliance. So hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, fires, all these once in 100-year events that happen every year or so. But we had always looked at them as local. Most people did. So if I survived a hurricane, if you survived a hurricane, you figured I figured the outside world was going to come to my assistance, bringing bottled water and help me reconstruct and so on and so forth. And if there was a hurricane that hit your island, here on the west coast of the United States, on my island, I sympathized. I heard about it, but it's not. I can send some money or something. Now this coronavirus has told us it's not local. What we're doing to this planet is totally global. We always knew it. We knew there was climate change, and we knew that's caused by a failing economic, governmental, social system, what we call a death economy in economics. We knew it was there intellectually, but we didn't really get it. I think this virus is making us get it, and it's nature speaking. It's the spirit of the virus. And my shaman friends, who I'm in touch with quite frequently still by Zoom and telephone and so forth, they've got these technologies now in so many places. They'll tell you that the reason that a vaccine works is because it's the spirit of the virus balancing out, tranquilizing, calming down the spirit of the angry virus. But it will, if we don't listen this time around, if we're given a second chance because of the precautions that we're taking, and we don't listen to the real issue of changing the way we live on this planet and changing our perception of what it means to be successful human beings from the short term to the long term, we'll be hit by something much worse than this particular virus. Keep up your great work, both of you. I love what you do. I love you and hope to see you in person.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.